to the Pick Six podcast. We're doing it on a Wednesday because I have a half-court podcast, the big Nebraska Creighton preview with Johnny Attau on Thursday morning. So we're doing Wednesday. Thanks for coming to us in the middle of the week. I'm Sam McKewon along with Evan Bland and special guest Tom Shatel, who had the crystal ball, plays prophet, and talks about Nebraska playing for a bowl game. And by God, they beat Purdue, and if they beat Minnesota, they might just be able to punch their ticket no matter what happens in the final week. We don't even know who they're playing. It'll be it's going to be an interesting 10 days. We've got Big Ten stuff to talk about today with football programs shutting down due to COVID and potential cancellations, already cancellations. What the heck the Big Ten's going to do? We're also going to talk a little bit about Nebraska's bowl proposition, their possibilities of playing in a postseason game, which improved immensely based on the results of last weekend. And then we'll also talk just about Nebraska basketball in a big week coming up, playing Georgia Tech tonight, playing Creighton on Friday. And then we're going to go over the Huskers senior class at the end. Evan and I will kind of talk about our memories of each Husker senior. We try to do that every year, so that'll be something fun that we do. I'm going to make sure that everybody knows who our sponsor is before we get into it. Our sponsor is Team Schwalbach. The Schwalbach Agency is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Husker fans money. They're going to sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys. Boats, motorcycles, RVs, off-road vehicles. If you've had a roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwalbach, Kyle Schwalbach, Nancy Mostek, or Kyle Murdoch a call at 402-590-5200. They can help you save a bundle. Free no obligation insurance reviews and quotes. They're going to make sure all their fellow Nebraska fans are properly protected. Again, you can contact them at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thanks to Team Schwalbach, our sponsor. All right. So let's go right into it, guys. Let's talk Big Ten. Ohio State and Michigan is off for the first time in more than a century, I think. And Ohio State is at 5-0, and they sort of need a dance partner. Purdue has shut down its practices. Indiana shut down its practices. In theory, Ohio State would need another team to shut down its practices so it could have a dance partner to play with. At this moment, Wednesday at 10 a.m., the Big Ten athletic directors are meeting, and they may come out of there with a solution. Nebraska tried to warn the Big Ten about this more than a month ago, Tom, and it seems like the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yes, they are, and it was interesting to me to hear or to see one national scribe, Stuart Mandel, the athletic, basically admit that, I was wrong, Nebraska was right, and he did so over and over on Twitter, which I thought was a little much. I mean, just say it once. You don't have to, answer every tweet, but he did, and, more power to him. Some Nebraska fans want the Big Ten to come out and, mea culpa, whatever. Kevin Warren, we don't hear from him even in the good times, much less the bad. So is he still the commissioner? I don't know. But he ain't going to apologize. So, and today, Desmond Howard on the ridiculous show Get Up, which, man, you got to take that in small doses. But Desmond Howard said, they should let Ohio State, whatever they need to do, they should do it for Ohio State. Which, okay, great, thank you. So Nebraska's getting sort of getting a lot of, I don't know if you call it late or maybe backhanded credit. Nobody's going to say that they were right, maybe, but they were right, and they just have to take the solace or the knowledge with an N that they were right, and they don't have to hear it from everybody because they're not going to hear it. But they had it right. And as for Ohio State, absolutely do what you got to do to get them in the playoff. One, it's the right thing to do. They beat Indiana. It would have been the right thing to do in August to hold off and play from the beginning, or at least wait. Would have been the right thing to do to let Nebraska play Chattanooga. So it's never too late to do the right thing. So also, I like to see the Big Ten with a whole lot of egg on his face, and basically the button-down presidents have to admit that they love football. So, yeah, I'm all for letting Ohio State do whatever. And I think the ADs will just waive their little rule and say, you don't need to have 6 games. You can have 5, you're in.
What do you think, Evan?
I agree. I think that's ultimately what will happen is if Ohio State can't find a partner this weekend, and I don't anticipate them switching up opponent, matchups this late. I would imagine they'll just say, okay, you're good with 5. But I think it's been interesting kind of gauging Husker fans this last day or two. And it seems to me the consensus is stronger now than it has been, that like fans say, okay, go ahead and do what it takes to get Ohio State where it needs to be. They are the conference's best team. There's a financial windfall that comes with that. There are still a few kind of petty ones out there that say, too bad, stick to the rules that you set. But it seems to me more of the satisfaction is coming from the fact that Nebraska set a precedent, that it forced the Big Ten to go public with that when it did. And now it has to kind of backtrack and kind of like Tom said, they have to kind of show their hand a little bit. Maybe there's a little hypocrisy coming out there. Maybe there's just kind of an about face or a double standard that comes from this thing. And I think ultimately that's what Husker fans like to see. The whole national media dunking on the program in the last month, I think has bothered a lot of people, especially those that follow the program where things were misconstrued, right? The Scott Frost presser from August that they wanted to just play football was totally blown out of proportion nationally. And I think that's the case for sure. And fans that follow the program, recognize that. And so, I think they are taking joy in trolling guys like Stuart Mandel or other scribes and kind of showing them what they wrote on Twitter, a month or two ago and what they're putting out there now. But yeah, I think ultimately everyone, for the most part, is in agreement that the Big Ten needs to do what it needs to do to get Ohio State into that title game. And if they win that thing, go to the playoff.
Yeah, the Big Ten set itself up a little bit for failure here by creating 2 seemingly contradictory rules. The first rule is you couldn't go outside the league to pursue a non-conference game. And I think the reasons they gave for that were safety related and testing related. So Nebraska tried to play Chattanooga. That didn't go well. The Big Ten said no. The second rule, though, was you have to play a minimum of 6 games to qualify for your conference championship game. If you're going to eliminate a way for a team to get that 6th game, and you're going to basically put Ohio State at the mercy of Maryland and Michigan, and to some extent itself because it canceled the game against Illinois, then you're essentially setting yourself up for failure, because Ohio State could have gone out and played somebody when Maryland canceled on them, but they weren't allowed to do it. They could do the exact same thing this week. I don't think they would play A&M, but they certainly would play Cincinnati, and I think they'd beat Cincinnati by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I really do, and I think Cincinnati's a good team. But I think Ohio State's motivation and their knowledge of that team and their knowledge of Luke Fickell gives them a big inherent advantage anytime they play Cincinnati, as we saw last year when they won 45-0. So I think they would play that game, but they're not allowed to play it. So it's kind of like the parent that says, look, you can't watch any screens during the week. You can't. You can't watch any tablets or any TV or any of that. But you also, 7-year-old, can't go outside and play. You can't go out and burn up any energy. You can't go outside. You can't watch any screens. The only thing we'll let you do is read. And you're going to have to read for, 10 hours or whatever. And by the end of the week, the parent is frazzled and doesn't want to deal with it anymore and just shoves a tablet in their face. Here you go, because the Big Ten set up too many rules on the front end. And I think that problem is kind of created this moment. I think it's going to be, and we should find out perhaps while we're recording the podcast, whether or not the Big Ten decides to ditch its 6-game rule, which I think would be the easiest thing to do. It might make Indiana mad, but it'd be easiest thing to do. Or they try to move the schedule around and, manipulate matchups or whatever, which I think is the much harder thing to do. I think the easiest thing to do is just to go ahead and get rid of this rule now and let Ohio State do what they need to do. Then there's the subsequent question of, does Ohio State even need to play a game? Because at this point, they're number 4 in the playoff. Hard to see how they're going to drop below 4 when I think the only game Texas A&M has left is against Tennessee, and Alabama and Florida are going to play one another. It's really hard to see how Texas A&M is going to leapfrog Ohio State. The only thing I could see happening is Florida beating Alabama, and Florida and Alabama making the playoff, and Clemson and Notre Dame making the playoff, which means Ohio State's left out because it didn't play enough games.
Right.
Now, if Clemson loses to Notre Dame, they're out. They're out of the playoff. There's no way they're going to be let in with 2 losses to the same team. So if Notre Dame beats Clemson, Clemson's gone. They're gone from the playoff. And at that point, maybe it's Cincinnati, maybe it's A&M, maybe it's Florida, I don't know. But if Clemson beats Notre Dame, and most people will pick that to happen, and Florida beats Alabama, that looks like a top 4 to me. And I'm not sure that Ohio State will have played enough games if they don't play this week.
Well, now, Sam, you raised a good point about the Big Ten set up to fail. Was that on purpose? It's a good question. Here's my question:
You think so?
I mean, these are supposed to be intelligent. The Big Ten is full of highfalutin, high researching, high educating, all kind of people that are important and very smart. How could they botch this? Unless they did it on purpose, which, okay, I'm not wearing a ball cap, not a tinfoil, but seriously, who came up with these rules that you have to sit out 21 days? Who came up with the 6-game rule? Was it ADs or presidents?
The 6-game rule to me is a huge mistake. That's the worst of the bunch.
ADs or presidents, though?
They did. I think the ADs, and I don't think the medical team came up with 6 days.
Well, the football people, the ADs are for our football people.
They are.
What are they thinking? So that was a huge miscalculation. That's not taking the virus very seriously.
I think it was an incentive to make sure that teams didn't cancel willy-nilly.
Well,
but guess what?
Yeah, it was.
I think there might have been one team
that
canceled when they probably shouldn't have. Or shouldn't have is the wrong word. When other teams would have played.
Right.
But outside of that, I think all of these outbreaks were pretty legitimate. I mean, Ohio State couldn't do anything about what
taking
happened.
the coaches very seriously if they think they're just going to quit because they don't want to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? But anyway, when nobody else in the country did that. So even the Pac-12, which is always last and everything, came out looking a lot better than the Big Ten on this thing. So
they did.
The key to the pandemic, which we've seen since March, is flexibility. And I tell my daughters that we'll go to school when they tell us to go to school. We'll stay home when they tell us to stay home. We'll do this. We'll do that. You just got to be flexible, and you got to be resilient. And Big Ten was the Big Ten, and the pandemic laughed at the Big Ten. So,
if the Big Ten had started their schedule in September, the way Nebraska wanted, or even it started 2 weeks before October 24th,
would that be something that original schedule? I mean, that would have been the Big Ten would have been out in front, and Kevin Warren could have run for president then, I guess, or whatever. But last night, here we go. I'll get up my soapbox on this. Last night, Big Ten had a great night. Iowa looks fantastic. Final Four good. Illinois, Final Four good. Playing non-conference basketball games. Illinois on the road in the environment where Coach K wants to shut down. So, it's dangerous, I guess. Why are they allowed to play non-conference games in basketball but not football? I mean, somebody explain that to me besides dollar signs. I get that. Network revenue, network inventory, but come on. So No wonder Kevin Warren's hiding, because there's too many questions he can't answer.
I would say that I think it's just the difference between the sizes of the roster, and I think the Big Ten, at its very heart and core, is a basketball league.
That's it.
They're not giving up the ACC basketball challenge because the Big Ten knows is a basketball league.
Basketball means more to these states than football.
I feel like that's kind of it. Now, I don't, in some of the, in Wisconsin, I don't know. It's probably even up, but yeah, I mean, Nebraska is the football state, and I think Penn State is a football school, definitely, and Ohio State. But everywhere else, I mean, I think it's kind of a toss-up, or it's heavy basketball. Like,
I mean, you could say that the pandemic was worse earlier in the fall, but it's not. It's arguably worse now than it was back in August. So
it is. Oh, it's absolutely worse.
So I mean, it's it'll drive you crazy.
As expected. I mean, people expected there to be a second wave in the fall because it got colder and people went inside. Well, we don't need to go over COVID.
Okay, I'm off that. Let's move on if you want to.
The Big Ten, I think, is in a tough spot, and I think waiving the 6-game thing would be the easiest thing to do. But I believe it was put in place to protect teams from saying we're just taking the month off. Unfortunately, I think most of the cases were fairly legitimate, and the testing did not prevent contact tracing. And I don't know if there is a uniform contact tracing policy across all 14 schools. I just don't think there is. And so I think you've got situations where each university is making its own separate decision on how they're doing that with their health department. Certainly in the Pac-12, it is no fault of Stanford that Stanford can't even play in its county, and that's not their fault. So Stanford's obviously dealing with a different situation than Colorado is. Yeah. Colorado's doing well. I mean, they're quite well. Even USC has got a different situation. So it's a tough situation and a tough spot. And, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's a good chance that you get the waiver this week. The 6-game thing can be waived, but I think there's still that lingering concern that even if Ohio State makes the title game, will 6 games be enough if Clemson beats Notre Dame and Florida beats Alabama? If Alabama beats Florida, then I think Ohio State's in either way. I don't think A&M can jump them, and I'm damn sure Cincinnati won't. But if Florida wins, people are going to say Alabama's a better team than Ohio State, and Alabama has effed Ohio State once before on this thing in 2017 when they didn't even win their own stinking division. And they go to the playoff over Ohio State because Ohio State had an extra loss, and then Alabama wins the national championship despite not even playing for its conference title. So Alabama's done this once before, and it won't surprise me if they do it again. And here's the last thing that I think is interesting. For all the national hand-wringing that was done with the media back in, August and September, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Guess what? The teams that have been most rewarded in the Associated Press poll were the teams that started play in September. If you look at the rankings now, the teams that were rewarded were the teams that worried the least about COVID, which goes to show that when it comes right down to it, the moral aspect of it didn't have much effect on people's opinion of the quality of the football. Coastal Carolina isn't anywhere near the number 13 team in the country. If you're talking about power rankings, you put that team against Iowa, and I'll take Iowa by 14. But the reality is Coastal played 10 games, and Iowa's played 6. And that's just the way it goes. And so the teams that have been rewarded were the teams that worried the least about COVID back in September. And the media's got to own that. And that'll be hard for them to own.
They don't own anything.
The actions speak louder than the tweets. And the actions say, we prefer the teams that did not take this as seriously as the Big Ten and the Pac-12. They have punished the Big Ten and the Pac-12 in their rankings as a result. I'm the only one who ranked UCLA this week at 3-2. I've watched a lot of UCLA. They're a good football team. But nobody else is going to rank that team. They're going to rank Marshall, but they're not going to rank UCLA. And I think that's because UCLA hasn't played enough games. People do the record watching, and they just watch what the record is. And that rewarded the teams that stayed quiet about the virus and didn't do nearly as much as the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did. And those two leagues have been burned for their caution. And it just speaks to how there's the this is how we think it should be, and then this is how it really was.
Well,
and the media rewarded the teams that showed less caution with COVID.
You can't worry about the media or what
they're worried about it. I'm just saying that's the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were so image conscious. Right. And as it turns out, the teams that got rewarded by the people who were worried about the image were the teams that worried less about COVID. It's a lesson for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 to understand. Don't pay too much attention to what criticism you got coming your way from USA Today. It doesn't matter that much. It just doesn't matter that much. And I think they did. I think they did and do care about that. They want to be set apart. Unfortunately, their teams are lowly ranked in the polls because they haven't played enough games.
My point is, don't worry about the media trying to apologize or come back. Right. This is the world of hot takes. What you say today is gone tomorrow, and it's I'm not saying they don't have an impact. I'm just saying don't look for any apologies. And by the way, where are all the hot takes about basketball playing? I mean, basketball's a mess right now, and where's all the hot air from all the hot air people about this is so dangerous? What are they doing? We shouldn't be playing basketball. I'm sorry, I can't hear anybody. Maybe because I'm on Zoom, I can't hear all the national media people yelling about basketball. It's a hypocritical world we live in, and hot takes are everywhere. And Evan, how you doing?
I would think Nebraska fans feel that way about the media because they feel like they've been picked on, and so
I get it.
I hear that a lot.
Don't make your life worry about the media.
The conversation that Mandel had with Nebraska people online yesterday is just indicative of somewhere along the way there was this just undue concern about COVID, which is perfectly legitimate. I'm just saying that the actions that came after the words would indicate that you rewarded the teams that weren't nearly as concerned about it.
And you can argue that those are the same teams that are up there every year. So,
yes,
in the pandemic, we got
Louisiana. I mean, Iowa State and Oklahoma were not hurt by playing early. They're I think 7th, 11th in the college football playoff.
Alabama's coach and Clemson's quarterback both had COVID too. Exactly. So, you know what I mean? So they were.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And they move on. It's just, they're so good they don't even need them.
If I could kind of turn this in a little bit different direction too, we talk about the inflexibility of the Big Ten and the late start. A lot of it goes back to just how ineffective the daily antigen testing turned out to be. I mean, that's why they delayed it 3 weeks or a month, was so everyone could get set up and get tested every day.
Right.
The theory was that would allow teams to power through, that there wouldn't be entire position groups wiped out by the virus. I don't know. I guess I was surprised by how ineffective that turned out to be. I mean, there were outbreaks. I think what's the number? 10 of the 14 teams have been affected in the Big Ten by cancellations at this point. More than half have had some sort of significant outbreak within the program. Credit Nebraska for being one of the few that's avoided that, and guys have really, for what it's worth, hunkered in and prevented any kind of an outbreak. But I guess I've been surprised because when they came out with that, it really did seem like, okay, they're not going to be tested 2 or 3 times a week. It's going to be a daily thing. This is going to limit things. Were you guys surprised at how ineffective that turned out to be, and how much that then impacted this minimum game rule that maybe a month ago didn't seem like such a big hurdle, but turns out it is?
Sam, go ahead.
Okay, so here's what I would say is that I think the Big Ten anticipated, based on the frequency of testing, that the team population positivity rate might eclipse what it needed to each week based on the number of people and staff that were testing positive. 1. 2, I think what wasn't anticipated is that the 6-game rule wasn't sufficient enough deterrent to teams not shutting down. And so again, I think most of the shutdowns have been pretty legitimate. But I can also say that South Carolina over the weekend played in an environment that no Big Ten team would have even dreamed of trying, except maybe Nebraska. South Carolina, I think, had 46 scholarship players available, and their coach was fired. They didn't have to play, and they did. And I think that's probably more about the SEC and South Carolina and what that says versus anything else. Simultaneously, Georgia was furious at Vanderbilt for canceling its game by claiming that they were under the 53-man limit. Clearly, Georgia did not believe that that was true, that Vanderbilt was essentially saying a bunch of players were hurt or had opted out or whatever. So there's a different kind of culture in the SEC, a certain accountability that, again, if we're just talking straight morals about COVID, I think people could view as pretty objectionable. Within the construct of the bubble of the league, though, I think there was probably some, whatever you want to call it, as it relates to, we're going to try to play as many games as we possibly can. I remember, I think it was Monday of last week, tweeting something about Minnesota not getting more cases and that they had 21 players and 26 staff. And I said, well, the staff's going to come off the quarantine and they're going to be good to go. And so it looks like Minnesota will play. And the response that I got, again, from national people on Twitter was sort of an apoplexy. Like, what are we doing? Why would we do that? What is the point? What's the purpose? And that's what I mean, is that the Big Ten is more – the Big Ten is, what do you want to call it? They're more susceptible to that criticism. They're more apt to look at that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be susceptible to it. I'm just saying they're more likely to hear random Twitter voice or random people in the media on social media being mad about not taking COVID seriously than I think the SEC is. That's just probably the best way I would put it. The SEC did what it had to do to make sure that Alabama, Texas A&M, and Florida were taken care of. I think the Big Ten has now been forced into that position, and there's going to be people who are uncomfortable with it because it means taking care of Ohio State in a way that, generally speaking, the Big Ten doesn't always do. Even the Big Ten statement yesterday had nothing to do with what they were going to do with Ohio State, but it was 3 paragraphs about the safety and health and wellness of all the people, including the fans. And there aren't even any fans at the games. So there's just a different culture and ideal within the two leagues. I think the antigen testing probably failed to some degree, but I think contact tracing is different in each locale, one. And two, I think the red-orange designation gave teams the freedom. And then you started seeing words get confused. Like Ohio State said they had to pause. They didn't have to. They were never in red. You don't have to. They chose to. So you started seeing the language get a little muddled. And I think that's just because people – and then you see people posting maps of where coronavirus cases are high as if the players don't exist in a bubble and the virus is airborne and it can, coordinate attacks and it's sentient, and it's not. So, there's all of these different aspects to it. And even Ryan Day's talking about, well, there's a lot of cases in the county. I'm like, yes, that increases the likelihood that one of your players is going to come in contact with somebody. But if you're bubbling the right way and you're keeping your cohort tight, it's much less likely to happen. It's like if you sit inside your house for 30 days, COVID will not get in. You'll be there by yourself. It's not attacking. It's not a chemical weapon. So, there's all these different aspects. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm just saying that all of those things align in a certain way that indicates this is just how a lot of the people in the Big Ten region feel. I take COVID seriously. I'm the one who wrote the wear a mask column. So everybody knows where I stand on what I think of the situation. I'm just saying that there's a difference between the way SEC and the SEC states look at this situation and Big Ten and Big Ten states look at it. There's just a difference. And I think it's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. Prosecution rests.
And who's going to win? The SEC is going to win. That's my point.
Yeah.
Is that at the end of the day, who's going to get rewarded? By the SEC and the frickin' Sun Belt. Louisiana and Coastal Carolina and
Watch the awards too, like the awards voting, the postseason stuff. I mean, I'm sure you do some of that, and I do some of that, and you look at the numbers. Absolutely, I mean, the teams that play the full seasons, those are the numbers that you like. Those are the guys that are going to get rewarded.
Yep. The Coastal Carolina guy probably won't be coach of the year because it'll probably go to Matt Campbell, who I think deserves it.
Sure.
But he'll finish second, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying – I mean, they were going to have a good season no matter what. But, you know, the fanfare surrounding Coastal Carolina right now is bigger than the fanfare surrounding Scott Frost's 2017 UCF team, which nobody paid attention to until the last 3 weeks of the season. You know, so I'm just saying that that's what ends up happening. Like, people are applauding that BYU's going cross-country to go play a football game. I'm like, again, this is in the pandemic, I thought. Like, we're applauding that now. 2 months ago, don't you dare play a football game. And now it's, look at the honor and courage of BYU and Coastal Carolina to pair up. It's those competing ideologies coming from the same people that I think is frustrating. You know, that piece of it seems inconsistent from a principal perspective. All right, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to let you guys talk about bowls. Tom, I remembered reading what you wrote on Friday, and I'm like, bowls, huh? And then I realized
bowls
on Tuesday, bowls.
Bowls?
You think guaranteed rate is the best? Is the way it's going to go, huh?
What a strange name for a bowl in a pandemic. Yes, I do. I guess it could be the Duke's Belk Bowl, which I will never accept because it replaced the Holiday Bowl. I mean, Charlotte's a nice enough town, but anyway, yes, guaranteed rate seems to be that place where they're slotting Maryland and before last week Purdue and now Minnesota. Anybody but Nebraska. Nebraska's going to have to get their attention by just winning, and they can. But the Fiesta Bowl hasn't had Nebraska red in almost 20 years. Actually, it's been 21 years. Since Charlie McBride last coached a game, that's the last time that Nebraska was down in the Valley. So the Fiesta Bowl runs the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. It's the old Insight Bowl. Remember, that's where Nebraska was supposed to go in 2010, and Dan Beebe got involved and said, we're going to put Missouri there to play Iowa because we want to stick it to Nebraska one more time. And so would the Big Ten do that? I don't know. I suppose it could be Maryland. But I'm thinking if you're the Fiesta Bowl, you're running that bowl, you'd love to have Nebraska versus a Big 12 team. It'd be great. It'd be great theater. And good ratings because you're not having any fans. So, they got to win Saturday. I think if they win, I'm not saying they're in. But apparently that's one of the bowls still alive and still kicking. So we'll see how that goes. But I think there's a very good chance for that if they win Saturday.
For what it's worth, that if it was that game, kickoff for that game is set for 9:15 p.m. Central Time on December 26th. So that would break Nebraska's 11 a.m. noon streak.
It's not a good. Yeah, we would. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. But that's would not be good for writers with families who travel. But you know what? You got to do what you got to do. On the other hand, it's
if Nebraska wins out, let's say they win Saturday,
okay,
and they win next week. Let's say they play Rutgers next week.
Could they move up?
I think they're going to move up.
I don't know who would they replace. Would they replace Iowa? Probably not.
No, but Iowa's going to get one of the prime steak bowls. I mean, they're going to be up there.
They're going to get Music City, or I've seen them in the Belk Bowl. I've seen them in Music City. I don't know. If
Iowa wins this weekend, they're probably January 1.
I don't know.
Outback or
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Maybe 7-2.
Where do you put Wisconsin?
7-2.
If Wisconsin loses Iowa this weekend, if If Wisconsin loses to Iowa this weekend, Wisconsin's 2-3.
Yeah, but records don't matter.
Well, but it matters in the sense that, like, if Iowa beats Wisconsin,
right?
I think Iowa's a January 1 bowl because they'd be 7-2 or 6-2.
Outback Bowl. Get me Outback. They always love the Outback. It's the Iowa Outback Bowl. But
Northwestern's probably January 1.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're going to beat Illinois this weekend.
The Rose is a playoff site, correct? So that's going to be Ohio State.
And Indiana's probably January 1 as well. January 2, whatever.
So,
right.
So from a Nebraska perspective, though, if they go to a bowl, like what significance do you guys place on that? Because essentially they would just continue their season by a week. You're not getting, the fabled extra bowl practices. Yeah. They're still going to be right around 500. I mean, like, do you take that as a sign of progress or a marker of things going in the right direction? Is that just a pandemic thing? Like, how do you guys, if they were to go to a bowl, say they finish 5-4, 4-5, like, what do you make of that as far as how the program is measured?
If there's a salesman bone in Scott Frost's body, yes, you sell the heck out of that.
Yeah,
because you haven't gone to a bowl. I mean, it's been 4 years, guys. You remember Nashville? Broadway Street, Hot Chicken.
I'm rooting for the music sample for that reason.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those bars without TV sets, I couldn't find a game.
Yep.
But I could hear good music. 4 years. 4 years since then. Sam took me to breakfast. I still have the little the little glass. It was like a mason jar. I still have that thing from that place you did me to breakfast. 4 years since the bowl game. So I think that yes, you sell the heck out of that. If you're Scott Frost, here's progress. You made a bowl game, and people won't care what the record was. They'll be happy about going to a bowl game. So that's a little bit of it's a little slice of normalcy for Nebraska football they haven't had. So step forward. Beats the heck out of not having a bowl game, right? So yeah, I think it's a big deal, Evan. I really do.
I agree. I think it would. They win 4 in a row to end.
Well, that's the thing.
You'd be fired up.
If any kind of momentum carryover right now, you could sell Adrian Martinez. Okay, we could talk about this at the end of the season. What can you sort of take going forward? Well, Adrian Martinez looking like Adrian Martinez. If he keeps that going, you go, okay, you put that in the next year and go, that's going to be very handy to have. Eric Shenander defense playing well enough to win Big Ten games, handy to have. Won't be great, but it'll be handy to have. A kicker who can make a field goal, handy to have. Okay, offensive line issues, we'll see. But our defensive line looks pretty stout. Linebackers look good, better. It's going to be receivers and who's your running back, and what do you do with McCaffrey without having him sit on the bench another year? So these are little things that are going to come up, but I think that's what makes the next 2 weeks intriguing.
Yeah, I agree. What Nebraska is going to become long term is a discussion we'll have after the season. We'll wait until after a bowl game,
right?
Because I think there's still a really big question out there looming about. And Scott's kind of talked about it, and actually Tom's written about it. This conversation about, well, do you just want to be? Do you want to aim for what good football looks like, which is kind of what Northwestern and Iowa, and let's say, for argument's sake, Iowa State is doing? Is that sort of your aiming point, or is your aiming point, screw that? Let's be Oklahoma. Let's be Clemson. Let's be that Ohio State. Let's go toe to toe with Ohio State. And then you have to ask yourself whether you can aim at both of those things at the same time, because I think Nebraska would love to aim for the second thing. But let's be honest, Northwestern isn't Ohio State, and there's a reason why. And in order to be Ohio State, you have to do certain things, and it puts you at risk of other things when you do it. And Nebraska's trying to do those things. They're trying to recruit the kids that you got to recruit, and it hasn't panned out very well. And so I think last week what you saw at Purdue was a team, like Tom wrote, that's trying to put it together all three phases and try to be a more sound football team. I think you'll see that team against Minnesota next week and in a bowl game too. The question is whether or not that ceiling and the ceiling that creates is the kind of ceiling that fans long-term will be satisfied with. But that's a question we can break that down for 2 hours after the season because it's worth.
Right. That's a big.
Because I'm more on the if you want to be Clemson, then aim to be Clemson and do all the lumps that you got to take in order to get to the other end of the process. But I think Nebraska fans, and I think Frost maybe too, is like I can't sit here and lose for 5 years just so we can compete for a national title in 10.
So what are you saying is what are they sacrificing by aiming high? Is it looking the other way on character and recruiting for talent? Is it, eschewing the local 3-star and aiming for the 4.5-star? Like what do you feel like they sacrifice to be an average team that you –
I think Evan, that's a good question. I think they sacrifice sanity. This program and state needs to have sanity. They need to be stable for a while. You aim high and you fall way short, you start to want to fire your coach. I heard that about Frost already this season from normally saying Nebraska fans, well, it's over. It ain't going to work. We need to get what's the buyout? Well, no, Nebraska doesn't need that, okay? They need to learn how to win. Scott Frost needs to reinvent winning at Nebraska.
Right.
And in a league where you can't play like Oregon. I'm sorry. He's going to have to figure that out. I know that they've been really close on these games, but you've got to play efficient and clean, and that's the first priority. And learn how to play good football. Get that figured out first, then worry about scheme. Because that doesn't matter if you can't snap the ball and block and tackle and all that jazz. So, and then you've got to figure, okay, if we go to bowl game, that's a pretty good year. We don't need to, we want to be like Clemson. But if you've got to be sane to make if you're going to grow and become something else. It's great to have high expectations, but I think we're all getting tired of the '90s and all that stuff, and hearing about it. And it's time for a new way to win. And his program hasn't known how to win the right way in a long, long time. So right now, people just want to feel good about the program, and it's hard to do that when you expect something that's way up there, and you really have no chance to get it. So I say yes for the short term, lower expectations to playing good football, going to bowl games. Would you ask your average Husker fan, look at Wisconsin's record, Iowa, where bowl games are going to, Northwestern, what are they doing? Would you take that? Oh, I think they would. For now, certainly for now. So that's what it has to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going to be a fun conversation to have when a full 2 hours. I'm not kidding; it'd take that long. But you go and look at the way Nebraska played Ohio State in Game 1, Evan. I think that kind of lays it out. I mean, Nebraska was playing that game differently than it was 2 years ago, and beyond that, I guess the cautionary tale is Michigan. Michigan made a conscious choice when they hired Don Brown, who's an extremely aggressive defensive coordinator, that we are gonna recruit the kind of cornerbacks who can basically say F you to any receiver in the country. And then they went to a spread offense with Josh Gaddis because on some level Jim Harbaugh knew that if we don't do what Ohio State's doing, or we don't make that move and make the leap to an offense that can move fast, can be really explosive and move away from a pro-style attack, we're not going to beat Ohio State. And they've made those two moves, and Don Brown is a sort of a punching bag now, and that offense is kind of screwed up because they don't have a good quarterback for it. That's what happens. Like, Jim Harbaugh has taken a lot of criticism, and he earned some of it because he's an oddball. But what he's trying to do is tool his team to become like those teams, and it's just extremely hard to do. And you can't. And he also works for an administration that I think just looks at this thing differently than Ohio State does. So, that's, I think, the challenge for Nebraska is I think you can say we're going to stop at 8-4'sville and 9-3'sville or 7-5'sville, and we're going to be comfortable with that for a while on our way to being elite. But as I've said many times before, I just doubt the likelihood of Iowa State and Northwestern ever getting to that level. And if you doubt that I doubt it, then watch what happens when Matt Campbell leaves in the offseason. And he's not going to leave because Iowa State wasn't good to him and the kids weren't good and all those things. He's going to leave because he knows he can't win a national championship there. So I think there's things you got to do in order to be in that conversation. I think Scott actually has a really good understanding of what those things are. I think it's hard to achieve. I think it's hard to achieve right now here because they got some kids up here, and Travis Fisher talked eloquently about it this week. They got some kids up here who are going to be good players where they're going, I think. And it just didn't fit. And I think that's frustrating. I think it's enormously frustrating. So on the one hand, I say recruit more Midwestern kids, get those guys in here. On the other hand, I understand what Ohio State, when they got really good and they started, playing for national championships under Urban Meyer, you can look and see where they got the players from. The Boses come from Fort Lauderdale. Ruckwan McMillan came from Atlanta. Justin Fields comes from Atlanta. You know where the players are.
Yeah, the Southeast, absolutely.
JT Barrett's from Texas. J.K. Dobbins is from Texas. Ohio State became a national recruiting program, and as a result, they became dominant. End of story. Mm-hmm. You want to talk a little hoops, Tom?
Yeah.
We've got Georgia Tech. Are you coming to the Georgia Tech game tonight? Gonna watch that one?
I've got. I don't know yet. I've got daughter basketball practice. And, I have to decide if I have duty to drive that or not. So.
What about Creighton?
I'm gonna watch it. So
Nebraska Creighton on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh. Creighton should have won that game last night. I felt like they felt a little bit. They missed some shots they shouldn't have, that they normally don't miss.
I thought they really pushed Kansas. Kansas hadn't played that well all year. They made some incredible shots. Kansas did, and they really upped their defense when they had to. I thought Creighton brought a lot of good things out of Kansas last night, and that's why Kansas won. The Creighton blinked a few times. The rebounding, that's the game where the inside presence and the rebounding probably going to hurt Creighton a little bit. Their bench, not quite ready for that prime time yet, but it's going to get there. And so that's a game where, yes, Creighton could have won. If you told me that's how they would lose, I would have said there's 100 other ways first besides that. There's no
you think
way.
there'll be a hangover for when they play Nebraska because of the way they lost?
No. They're too mature. Well, that's one thing I like about their team, Sam, is that these guys weren't around each other all summer and fall. And look how they've come out of the gate playing. It's like they never left. Like they were together all year. And the newcomers have really blended in well as well. So it really speaks to the way these guys handle themselves. They really care about their trade. They're all. These are very smart, very good basketball players who really care a lot about what they do and who they are. So I think that they're going to show up Friday. It's always a big game. Mm-hmm. Not as big as when Darren DeVries, who's now the head coach of Drake, when he was assistant at Creighton, Nebraska week was like hell week, and he ran around and he pounded it into him and got him all fired up, and so that was a bigger deal. Last
I
year was a
think
big
I
deal
think
because
Hoiberg's success in rivalry games, and he had a lot at Iowa
yes.
State. Plus the
I
fact
think
that
last
Doc
year was a big
Sadler was pretty good against Creighton. I think Nebraska has a different mindset than they did in the Miles era about this game, and it's a better one.
Well, Tim Miles was psyched out by Creighton. He psyched
He
himself
was.
every year. He got too emotional and he got in his head. And
It was too much to him. I never understood it. Like, he played it up too much.
right. Evan can appreciate this. The Dave Van Horn approach at Nebraska baseball was always the best approach. Yeah, we'll play Creighton. We'll play them 10 times. It's a good series. We like playing them, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to beat Texas. I'm not worried about Creighton. And so Tim Miles got too wrapped up into that. And, trust me, Creighton gets up for this game all the time. But they were really up for it last year after losing 2 years ago. So I found it interesting that the game was in Omaha, and I asked them why, and I thought that was a good answer, that they wanted Nebraska. They all agreed that Nebraska should have a chance to have fans and a sellout arena for this game, and they weren't going to have it this year, so they're going to go to Lincoln next year. So, I expect it to be. The question is, what does Nebraska see in this game? What does Teddy Allen see? What is Blanton? How are they going to approach this game? And they're
I think
getting
it'll
their
be a
hands
big
full
deal for
tonight.
Teddy. Huge deal.
I'm really intrigued by the new look Huskers and how they'll translate into this game. Like I said, they'll get their handful tonight, and I'll be kind of looking tonight to see how they do against Tech and the Ramblin' Wreck coming in here, and see how. And I think we'll be able to look a little bit to that as far as Friday night.
I think Nebraska's got a good shot of winning tonight. They're a better team than they were last year. I think Georgia Tech maybe isn't quite as good, but Georgia Tech runs a wonky zone that, Nebraska's offense can get a little impatient. And that's not just Teddy, who I think actually has the ability to match impatience. Like, he's the one guy that can go get it every time if he has to. But they've been impatient in other ways too. Guys that probably shouldn't be as impatient. And they need to be a little more patient, I think, on offense at times, just a few more seconds longer, not draw charges, things like that. But defensively, Nebraska's defense is so much better than last year. And a lot of that has to do with the caliber of the guys on the team, not just athletically, but their character. And I think Doc's leaned into it a little bit better because he's got better players to work with. And Doc's a really, really good defensive coach.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that Doc's elite at is taking the best player on the other team and taking him away. And so Georgia Tech has a guy tonight that's as good as anybody that Nebraska's going to face this year, Moses Wright. He averages 24 points, 11 rebounds. Interesting player, kind of a baby Zion, I like to call him. He's not as thick or as physical or as athletic as Zion Williamson, but the game is similar, and his range is improving. If they're able to shut him down, I think they win tonight. And then the challenge against Creighton is going to be, can you extend your defense out and take away, 3-point shooters who, if they're hot, look, Creighton beats Kansas if Mitch Ballock makes 2 or 3 more threes, and he didn't make them. And I'm not, he didn't make them because he didn't make them, but I think at the end of the day, there was a little bit of pressure there. I think when they play Nebraska, that pressure's gone. I mean, they come out and feel really good. And so Ballock's the kind of guy that could go for 25 and has against Nebraska. And Nebraska won't have a lot of answers for a guy like that because they're going to be busy trying to take away Zagorowski and trying to take away the paint. And Creighton's pretty damn good in the paint too. I mean, Christian Bishop's a good player, and so is Mahoney.
Too many answers there.
So I think Nebraska needs Creighton to have a bad shooting night in order to be able to pull off something that nobody expects them to do. But I do think they're going to be way more competitive, and I think part of that is because Nebraska has a few dudes for which Creighton doesn't have easy answers. Delano Banton, they don't have an easy answer for him. Nobody does. He's 6'9", and he's a legitimate guard. Teddy's a hard player to guard because he can shoot threes, and yet he can be methodical too and just kind of break you down and get into the lane and do goofy stuff once he gets there. So I'm looking forward to the matchup because I don't think Nebraska's climbed that mountain. I don't think they're as good as Creighton. But at the same time, I think they're about halfway up it. And last year, they were at the base of the mountain. They were like at the bottom of the mountain. So I think they've climbed it quite a bit in just.
I mean, we'll see where they stand. They haven't really played anybody of that note yet. So so we'll find out tonight. I'm really curious about Blanton tonight. I think he's the key to the game. If he brings the energy, if things don't go their way, do they hang in there? Are they going to make plays? I mean, if they miss shots, if they take a lot of shots, they miss those shots and they don't get the rebound, does it get tight? Do they get impatient, or do they keep playing? You know, that's the thing about Fred's teams. Just keep playing. Just keep shooting. Just keep coming. So, it's exciting. And it's a big week. And, again, I'm thankful to have games. I'm thankful to have this week. I say it every day because you can't take anything for granted right now. So it should be fun.
Amen. All right, thanks, Tom.
Yes,
Evan
sir.
and I are going to talk about the Huskers senior class, but excuse me, stick around for that if you want. But we're going to go.
For me.
We're going to go through the seniors. That's Tom Shatel, and we appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.
Thank you. Good chat there. So, Evan, we're going to go through the senior class for Nebraska. We can talk, I guess, a little bit about the Minnesota game, but I'd rather just go through the seniors. On some level, Nebraska should beat Minnesota. They should win the game. Minnesota's docked now 15, 20 players due to COVID and injuries. I don't believe Nebraska will be in anything like that situation. And I think Minnesota's defense is bad. It is one of the worst defenses in the country. And if Nebraska's offense struggles on Saturday, that will be an even further alarm of, like, you really need to think about what you're doing in the offseason. Because, again, what Nebraska's offense has settled into is a sort of modest ball control. We're going to move with some pace, but we're not going to hit a lot of big plays, and we're just going to kind of keep on schedule kind of offense. And there's nothing wrong with that. Northwestern does it real well, and Iowa does too. But against a bad defense like Minnesota, you need to be able to take advantage. And Iowa ran all over Minnesota. So we'll see if Nebraska is able to post 28, 31 points against a team that really doesn't have that much defense. They just don't. They're inexperienced. They're hurt. They're young. They're playing a bunch of freshmen who aren't physically ready. They're keeping it together with twine. So
I agree. Like, I'm not overly interested in breaking down the matchups with Minnesota. This feels like a week where it's just about Nebraska playing clean, and if it can continue the trends of the last two games, like, can Adrian Martinez continue to look rejuvenated like he has the last 2 weeks? Can the defense, look good against the run and stout against the pass too, like it has for the last 2 weeks? Can the special teams not actively hurt you? And I think if those things happen, if Nebraska plays clean and kind of continues on its same path, they should win this week. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and people make a big deal out of the defense last year at Minnesota, and yeah, it wasn't good. Okay, it wasn't good. But you know what? It was 14-0 at half. I mean, Nebraska didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter when Andrew Bunch was in there, and Minnesota had already kind of, taken their foot off the gas. That game could have been that game could have easily been 48-0 if that's what Minnesota wanted. So Nebraska's offense didn't show up that night. They weren't very good. That was a big part of the deal too. You cannot win a game if you do not score. So Nebraska's offense needs to do its part on Saturday, and if they do against, again, a very bad defense, then Nebraska will win. Let's go over the senior class. We'll start. You want to do it numerically, or do you want to do it alphabetically?
Oh, let's do it alphabetically.
Okay. So let me get this. Okay.
Well, and it's just kind of I like these because they're kind of a lightning round sort of deal. We're not breaking down stats on these guys, but these are guys, Sam, that you and for 5 years, a lot of them, and me for 4 have been around frequently, have written about frequently. I just think it's kind of fun to see what pops up, what random memories, or what are we going to remember about these guys.
All right, so that's good, and then I'll reserve the right to ask whether you think the guy will be back or not because the NCAA rules allow. Okay.
Let's do it.
DiCaprio Boodle.
That's a guy I'm just going to remember for moving around. His willingness to play safety, his willingness to play corner. One of a handful of guys from Florida who stuck it out for 5 years, maybe 6 if he comes back. And he's just become a guy that you just kind of put at corner and know he's going to do his job.
Yeah. Great guy. Has always talked to us, has never stopped doing that. Thoughtful, leader, captain. Won't forget 2017 Oregon. I think it was one of his very first games as a Husker. It was just talking to him outside the game they lost, obviously. And, he's from Miami, and Miami had just been hammered by a hurricane. And just, you always remember these guys have stories outside of football. So I remember him talking about I think my family's okay, he's 3,000 miles away in Oregon playing a football game, and there's stuff going back home. You think he'll be back?
I think he's a fringe guy. Like, I'd be interested to hear what his pro grade was if he could get drafted. But I feel like if he came back, he could continue to boost his stock. So
sure.
Seems like a guy. I talked to him a year ago, and he said kind of his next step would be to play football for money. So I think that's really going to depend on the grade. If I had to say, I would say yes, he would come back, but I think it'll be close.
Interesting. I think DiCaprio could have an incredible career in a variety of fields, finance, management, you name it. I think he will. I'll be curious to see if this guy is here or he's working for, Wall Street firm. Like I don't know that he needs to play football for money. Let's put it that way. I think he can do a lot of things with his life.
Yep.
Jared Bubak.
His recruiting process predates me coming onto the beat, but I was refreshing kind of his story about how he was the first commit, and I think it was the 2016 class before decommitting, going to Arizona State. He hasn't gotten on the field this year, but I think it's just kind of maybe another cool sign of in a roundabout way, Scott Frost kind of prioritizing those in-state guys and welcoming, finding a way to welcome those guys back when they can. And I don't know that we'll necessarily know what his impact on the team was because it was all behind the scenes this year, but pretty cool deal for a local kid to come back and get to wear the uniform.
Amen. Ty Chafin.
The only thing I know about him is I believe he's the last walk-on from the 2016 class, the walk-on class in 2016 who's still here. So got on the field, I think it was against Iowa 2017, and he's stuck it out. In-state kid who's lived the dream for a number of years.
Yeah, that's what I remember of him. For whatever reason, on the Huskers.com site, his 2020 year is listed as freshman. Connor Culp.
One of Nebraska's best grad transfers ever, right?
Yeah, he's been great.
What's he at 9 in a row now? He's become what everyone thought Barrett Pickering would become a few years ago. Right. I'm going to remember him for having his truck stolen and for people finding it for him eventually. I think that's cool. And he's a guy, he could come back next year. Why not? Bring him back. We'd love to have him back.
Connor Culp could go somewhere else, too. He could really do what he wants. But I think Connor Culp's going to come back. And I think he should. Markel Dismuke. Calabrasca. The last of the Calabrascans.
Yes, that's what I remember, too. And he was like the most unheralded of all those guys, right? Like,
yeah. Yep.
He's the last guy standing, and he's
the best of them.
2-year starter.
He's better than Brendan Radley-Hiles, I think.
Yeah.
They disagree, but
yeah, he's kind of
the bunch.
He's representative of a bygone fad, and he's he's made the best of it. So good on him.
Well, I'm sorry, Darnay Holmes was probably the best of them, but he didn't come to Nebraska. But I think he's better than Jeb. Jebbia is fine, but Jebbia, Tyjon Lindsey's had an unremarkable career. Dismuke has been a multi-year starter. Tough guy, Tough guy. I think he'll play in the NFL. JoJo Domann, and I think Dismuke will go. JoJo Domann.
Yeah, but Mr. Cinco himself, like he's at a position that's been so tough for Nebraska to get a hold of at outside linebacker. I mean, he's been on the field. He's been their most indispensable defender. He can cover. He can come up. I remember him for those multiple ACL injuries, battling through that early on. His injury, I think it was like a stress fracture before Frost came in, and so he took him longer to prove himself to the coaches. Like he's a guy who's had multiple reasons to leave over the years, and instead he has become one of their best defenders. So he seems like a guy who, like we said at Purdue, maybe made some money with how he defended Rondale Moore, and I think depending on his grade, he could go. Nebraska would love to have him back, but I would probably think he's probably gone.
I think Nebraska coaches him hard because they can tell that he could be a special player in the NFL, a guy that plays 5 to 7 years. They coach him hard, I think. And I think there's things about Domann that have frustrated them over the years, the freelancing, the instinctive, intuitive things that he does. But you know what? That's the kind of stuff that gets you on an NFL roster when you get along later. So Domann, to me, is a really good player and probably the best player on the defense, the guy that I'd probably select as the co-MVP at this point. And, I think he has a chance to potentially play next year in the NFL. We'll just have to see. I think he could come back and get better. And, boy, they'd love to have him because losing him will hurt them. But at the same time, he might go. Levi Falk, nice pickup.
Yeah.
Nice pickup. Good play. I like his game.
After the way Nebraska's brought in kind of one-year receivers the last couple of years, he's kind of broken that trend a little bit more reliable, more plays. The block punt was cool. And, someone who, got a chance in a position that needed someone to step up, and he's been one of their most reliable guys.
I think he comes back if there's a scholarship available because I think they'll need him. I still think they're a year away on getting all these rookies up to speed on receivers. Xavier Betts is maybe a cut above, but everybody, I think Levi could definitely do it. I like his game. I think he blocks. And oh, by the way, he is third on the team in catches. So who knew, right? Now they're not the world's greatest passing offense, but nevertheless. Matt Farniok.
I'm going to remember that dude as being accountable. I mean, he's gone through a lot of losing in his time at Nebraska, but he's been, a 2-year captain, kind of a mouthpiece for that line for probably 3 years now, really. And he's always come up. He's faced the questions. He's put in the work. I just have a lot of respect for a guy like that who puts it all out there, and even when it doesn't go his way, breaks it down afterwards and breaks it down honestly. I think he's one of those guys, one of those no BS guys who's going to say what he means, and that's been pretty refreshing to see.
I echo everything you said. I think he can play in the NFL, and I think like Nick Gates, he'll get better in the NFL. That's my sense of it. I think he played out of position a lot at Nebraska when he was at right tackle, having to face, Chase Young, and just not fair. Some of those things, but I think if he wants it and he's hungry for it, he'll be an NFL guy, much like Alex Lewis and Nick Gates got better when they got to the NFL. Christian Gaylord, tragic story there with losing his father.
Yeah, if he comes back, he'd be the rare 7th year player at a program, and
yep, there haven't been many. Nebraska had a long snapper a couple of years ago who was, but there haven't been many of them.
So, that would be interesting, but I'll remember him for Gabrielle Union wearing his jersey on game day and how that kind of came together through Twitter. That was a cool moment. And, a guy who's been a reserve, hasn't got a ton of playing time, but, by all accounts is a great guy living out a dream. And, in a tough time, people rose up and represented him. And I think that's something that is pretty cool and that a lot of people can relate to.
Amen. Will Honus.
I'm trying to remember what Barrett Ruud calls him. I think he calls him the ghost face killer. Was his nickname for him. Quiet guy. Wisconsin and Iowa were his finalists. in the recruiting process, had the injury, overcame that. I feel like he's kind of been pretty steady Eddie during his time at Nebraska outside.
Been good this year. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's 2 years off that knee injury now. This is his best season, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
And just kind of one of those guys that you plug and don't think a lot about. So he's been Mr. Reliable now for a few years.
Yeah, his speed's back, and he can hit. I'm sure Nebraska will lobby like nobody's business to get him to come back. He's had a good year, and I'd say maybe the best middle linebacker play they've had in a while. And I don't say that lightly. Maybe since Bando. It's been a while. Yeah. Colin Miller's been very good at times, a great leader. I think Honus has been a better player this year, and they could really use somebody next to Luke Reimer, who's special. Luke's a special player, but they could use a Honus next to him. So we'll see what happens, because if he leaves and Colin Miller leaves, and we're going to talk about Miller in a minute. Yeah, Brendan Hymas.
Yeah, Mr. Plug and Play, right? He could end up starting more games on the O-line than any Nebraska offensive lineman in history if they go to a bowl game, and doesn't talk a lot. I thought he was interesting when he spoke this week, had some good thoughts, but
very good thoughts.
Nebraska's most NFL-ready prospect, probably, in my opinion, the guy most likely to go of that class, probably will get drafted the highest of anyone in the senior class that decides to leave. And just a guy, again, at left tackle for the last 3 years, who's been very reliable, was thrust into duty, and as a true freshman in 2017, he is the only senior in this class from that 2017 class. So guy who played all 4 years, reliable guy. Nebraska's going to miss him.
Yeah, he's a good one. He'll get drafted in the NFL and have a long career. Colin Miller. Big fan of Colin. Big fan.
I think with him, all of his position changes. Kemp came in as a defensive end, played outside backer, inside backer. He's a guy who I think over the last 3 years, sometimes it's cool in this business, Sam, and I know you agree, it's cool to see how guys develop in terms of just how they talk to people and conduct themselves in interviews. He's one of those guys to me that over the last couple of years took huge strides. I mean, he's very insightful this year, thoughtful kid. Has come a long way, deserves to be kind of a leader and captain of that group. And
that's how you know the guys are going to become coaches. When that piece, when you start to see that thing go up the way it does, you're like, that's a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're starting to learn how their coaches talk.
Right.
And they start to understand how they're supposed to conduct themselves. They're watching. We've had so many other guys, just as a media point, in our careers covering this team, we've had a lot of guys who start out hot with the media and then they taper off over time, right?
Yeah.
The guys that start quiet and get more are usually the guys that I've found become the coaches. Will Compton will be a coach when he's done playing in the NFL, that kind of stuff. Joe Daly, for example, always a great talker, became a coach. Cody Green, same thing. Like the guys that become the coaches are the guys that already know how to talk about that stuff when they're in college because they're watching their coaches. Adrian will be the same way. So I don't know. Maybe that's a guy that, again, by the time he's 35, he could be a defensive coordinator. It won't surprise me if he is. So he may want to come back and play one more year, or he may want to get started on a coaching career because clearly he has the chops for that, and he's got the acumen and all the rest. Dedrick Mills, one of my favorite players. I'm going to take him. Dedrick's been through a lot. He didn't come from the easiest background. He played at Georgia Tech, played his rear end off there, was thrown off the team for a rule that they've now changed as it relates to positive drug tests, which he's talked about, so I'm not telling anything anybody knows. Goes to a tiny town, Garden City, Kansas, gets hurt. Is so hungry to start playing again that he's out there with, running, sprints, injured his arm. Comes to Nebraska, I think has been bit by the injury bug a couple of times. He basically went from my primordial 1971 run offense to a modern post, a 2020 run offense. And that took him time to adjust to. Probably would benefit from another year. at Nebraska, really at any school, but I like him. I like him. I think he's a hardworking guy, and he knows how to block, and he does other things. He needs help. They need not personal help. He needs help in the backfield. They need a guy that can come in and maybe do some of the things that he's not quite as good at, and then bring him in as the hammer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They need a guy that can complement Dedrick, because he's really, really good at a lot of things. But, man, you'd love to have a guy that could hit that outside zone and just run around everywhere the way Maurice Washington used to. So
I'll remember him as a guy who openly advocates for mental health, which is notable. His time last year when he was holding the football, when he had a little fumbleitis, and he asked media members in the press box to try to take the football from him, and nobody took him up on it. I thought that was pretty great.
He's a great kid.
He's got a lot of carries on him now as a college guy. So he's an interesting guy that if he's going to go to the NFL, as we all know, running back shelf life isn't great at that level. So right. Does he like it? I know he has said many times that he loves it at Nebraska. Will he come back for another year and enjoy that, or is he going to go on? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, well, you wish the best for him either way. I will just say again, that's a guy that I think can play in the NFL and has a future there. As it relates to Nebraska, he's going to be their top back if he comes back, but he needs help. Like, they need more people who can do things, because then you're not putting him in a position anyway. Brian Perez.
The only thing I can think of with him, well, he made, as Huskers.com says, he made a walk-on tryout in 2018. I think he was the first player from Iowa Western to join Nebraska's roster. I think that was his. He's the answer to that trivia question. Beyond that, not a guy who's played, but he stuck it out, and I'm sure he's helped behind the scenes.
Looks like the Big Ten is going to vote to allow Ohio State to play in the Big Ten championship, despite playing 5 games.
Yep.
The easiest solution to that problem, the only problem it does not solve, is the scenario that I brought up earlier.
Giving him another data point, yeah.
Florida beats Alabama, and Clemson beats Notre Dame. Alabama against Ohio State. Who do you think they're going to pick?
Yep.
Who do you think they're going to pick? No way is Ohio State getting the pick there. So Ohio State better be big Alabama fans come next week. Big ones. Ben Stilley.
Yeah, the rare actually in-state scholarship kid in the senior class. Again, someone
I just wouldn't want to mess with him. You know what I mean?
No.
He's just tough. Like, he just isn't vibe of like, man, you don't want to screw with that guy.
No. Outside linebacker is a true freshman. Another guy who I think has been really accountable publicly for a lot of bad defensive performances that Nebraska's had over the years. He's still come out and spoken. I'll remember his comments after the Purdue game a year ago saying, look, this is essentially a 365-day-a-year job, and to have that payoff ruined by stupid mistakes, like I rarely see guys that honest about how frustrating it is to have the work lack the payoff the way that it's been for Nebraska in the last couple of years. So appreciate that about him. He's a guy who will succeed at whatever he does. And like Chenander said yesterday, he's someone who they feel like is on the verge of a big breakout, and him coming back, I think, would make a lot of sense next year for both sides.
I think so too. Jack Stoll.
You want to
go? I think Jack's a little underrated in his career. I think he got hit with a real rough injury to start this season, and that's a shame. He got the knee thing with Ohio State, and he's come back and I think gutted through it. But, Jack, I think, was a little underrated during the course of his career. Picked Nebraska over Texas. That was always notable. And he's always been, pretty willing to chat with us. Not so much this year because I think the injury and all those things. But he was a productive player at Nebraska. probably has been surpassed because of the injury stuff by Austin Allen, who I think is becoming a damn good player. And Austin's probably right on the line of whether he'd want to go to the next level or come back. He'll probably come back. But that's what I'd say about Jack. Like him, good guy, fifth-year senior. This might be the last rodeo just because, hey, he's battled through some nicks and bruises, man. He's been through some.
I would just add, he was one of those handful of tight ends that was recruited by Mike Riley's staff. He's the guy who stuck it out. He's the guy that Frost mentioned in their first year as being kind of the leader of the offense right away, just in terms of the off-the-field stuff and the culture and all that. And, great guy, great mullet. And he's another guy who will succeed in life, whatever he does after football.
Deontay Williams.
I met Deontay at the Nebraska-Kansas basketball game when they were here. I think it was December 2017. He was a JUCO recruit, came in, and I talked with him just briefly afterwards, and he loved it. And he's been a guy who I've loved talking to because he's got that, that junior college background where he's just going to say what he thinks. And that is so, it's just refreshing to hear. And he's backed it up. He's a big hitting safety, had the unfortunate injury last year that wiped out most of that season, but he's had another pretty good season this year. And one of those, I think one of a handful of the original 2015 class sort of guys out of high school who came in, and everything he's earned. Like nothing has been given to that guy. And if he goes on to the NFL, man, I'm rooting for him because he's one of those guys. It's just been hard work. It's been love of the game that's gotten him this far, and it's going to be fun to see what he does.
Yeah, I think he might go, his testing and all that. I think he'll test really well. He hasn't played a ton of football just because he didn't play. He played some in 2018, and he was kind of a splash guy that year. But he didn't play much at all last year. And he's played, he's had a good year this year. But you just kind of wish Nebraska had one more healthy year with him. And if he decides to leave, which he may, that too is going to be a loss because again, he's playing better than people maybe think. He's having, he's a pretty good player, and he's having a pretty good year in a defense that probably isn't quite as aggressive as it was 2 years ago. They're not doing as many things defensively, maybe. So interesting. Last one is Bo Wilson.
Well, I think I talked to Bo maybe once. In his career, he didn't talk a ton, but he was a starter last year, had a lot of injuries, kind of rotating with Ethan Piper this year. I don't know that his game will, translate to the next level, so he could come back for another year. He could move on. My hunch would be that he would call it a career after this year with all the injuries that have stacked up. But, by all accounts, a consummate team player, a guy who's loved his experience. And, I think he's another one of those guys who will jump into something afterwards and be successful.
Started 23 straight games. So he has been replaced by Piper, who I think Piper's got some athleticism to him that is nice, and I think he's the future there. But you never know. Wilson may still play again this season with some alternating roles. But yeah, Bo I think has always been a good guy. One of the Mike Cavanaugh recruits from that 2016 class of offensive linemen that was notably strong. It was a pretty strong group. He was in it, and of course Farniak was in it. So, that's kind of where it's at. It's been an interesting group. I've enjoyed covering them, and I'll probably cover a few more because some of them are probably going to come back. So we'll see how many do. They could really use the guys back on defense, no question. I think offensively, they're moving forward. They could use Hymas, but I don't think Hymas. I think Hymas can play in the NFL. So I think on defense, some of the guys coming back could be really important. Stilley, Boodle, Onus, Deontay Williams, Doman. If he comes back, that's a big get because then they don't have to try to figure out who they're going to put in that spot. If Doman leaves, who plays there? And remember what he does.
They don't have that guy.
Outside linebacker, but he's really their nickel back.
Yeah.
Who covers Rondale Moore? Probably a slot corner, right? You bring in a corner. You don't bring in a 230-pound guy. The problem with when you bring in a corner or a safety or whatever is run. Now who's coming off the edge to get that backside play, that kind of stuff.
It probably forces them to put Cam Taylor-Britt back in that kind of do everything role, and maybe Braxton Clark or Quentin Newsome get healthy. They're at corner. I mean, that limits what you do.
I think that's a good thought. I think that's a good thought, and that may be what they do. I think Dolman and Cam Taylor-Britt are the two guys that I'd say are the most valuable players. All right, let's go with the picks now. Let's get through these real fast.
Yep.
Ready?
Roll.
Utah, Colorado.
Give me Utah.
Hold on. I'm going to take Utah as well, even though Colorado's undefeated. Georgia, Missouri. I'll take UGA.
Same.
Oklahoma, West Virginia. I'll take OU.
Same.
North Carolina, Miami. I'll take North Carolina.
I will take Miami.
Wisconsin, Iowa. Give me the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, Iowa's on a roll. Hawks.
USC, UCLA. UCLA.
Yeah, I'll take the Brew Crew as well.
Virginia, Virginia Tech.
I will take Virginia Tech.
I'll go with Uva. Nevada, 6-1. San Jose State.
That'll be another good one. San Jose State.
I don't know where they're playing that game because San Jose is like in the same situation as Stanford is. I'll take San Jose State. San Jose State. Washington, Oregon may not get played, but we'll pick it anyway. I'm going to take Oregon.
Same.
Arizona State, Arizona.
I will take Arizona State.
ASU.
Baby.
I'm going to take ASU as well. Nebraska, Minnesota.
I think Nebraska wins. I feels like the point spread's about right. Nebraska by 10 or so.
I'm with you. We only differed on 2 this week. I figured you'd take USC, but you didn't. But I believe in you at UCLA. All right, that's our podcast for this week, folks. For Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon. Boy, we just talked about a lot in 90 minutes. Peace.